Obviously, the situation in Ukraine has gone from bad to worse, and it happened very, very quickly. Last night, I think a lot of people were caught off guard. It might have been at home watching TV, and then all of a sudden saw the headlines start to roll across your screen that Russia had, in fact, invaded parts of Ukraine. The scope of that invasion now becoming more apparent through the course of today. There's a lot of speculation as to why perhaps Vladimir Putin decided to do this. If maybe perhaps the West was surprised by the fact that all the posturing that had been happening up until now might not have led to a full-scale invasion. As it turns out, it has. So we thought we'd try to get some answers here. Andrew RASIULIS is a fellow in the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. He is on the line right now. Mr. RASIULIS, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know what's going on in this part of the world, so I will ask you first of all, were you surprised by the fact that this turned out to be a full-scale invasion?
I was surprised by the full-scale invasion part, but not by the fact that Putin would exercise the military option to keep Ukraine out of NATO. This was a strategic objective of Putin's for quite a long time now. Putin has been asserting that he is restoring Russia as a great power, and Ukraine is an existential component part of that greater Russia. And the fact that diplomacy failed in the last several months, where the NATO and the United States would not offer the guarantees that Putin requested, that Ukraine would not enter NATO, once that was rejected, there was a period of hope that perhaps the other American offers on arms control, confidence building, would be a substitute for that. And even the Foreign Minister Lavrov, the Russian Foreign Minister, said that those discussions had not been exhausted as of late last week. But clearly, in the period since then, the debate inside the Kremlin, and there was one, was resolved in favor of the hardliners or the hawks, who decided that basically the arms control, the discussions that could drag on, the time was right, and this was Russia's best moment to move, because they had the forces in place and they couldn't keep them indefinitely, and they felt that if they went the arms control route, the West would drag things out, and eventually Ukraine would join NATO, so they'd ultimately lose the objective. So they took a huge risk calculus, knowing the sanctions were coming, and they developed a plan, and this is where my real surprise came in, that the plan involves all of Ukraine, not just a corner of it in the east, but they're doing it using special forces on a strategic scale, something that I've never seen before. They used that in a minor scale in Crimea in 2014, but now they're doing it strategically. Basically, they are crippling or making Ukraine seize up, paralyzing Ukraine, both militarily and trying to paralyze the government, which they eventually want to now replace. So they're doing this in a way that we did not foresee, and the game is still being played out. And I don't mean game lightly. This is a very serious business.
Can I ask you, when you talk about this whole issue of diplomacy, and I know we went through this call it a game, for the past couple of weeks, I kind of can't help but think in my mind this diplomacy was just something set up by Putin, knowing that it would fail, and using that as the pretext to invade. Is there any potential truth in that as far as you're concerned?
I believe there was a hope that it would work, because if the Americans and the Ukrainians and NATO had given written guarantees on Ukrainian neutrality, that would have satisfied Putin's objective, and he would not have had to exercise this very dramatic, risky military option. So I believe that the overture for a diplomatic solution was genuine. But the inability of Ukraine and the West to meet those demands, because they stood on principles and so on and so forth, led Putin to say he has no other option. And so he exercised this one. This was not his preferred option, but he was prepared to do it rather than back down completely.
Wow. I'm sorry, I just want to follow up, because I thought, and again, I've heard others express, this is not just me, the idea that, the diplomacy was set up, that it was never, ever going to happen, that the U.S. would simply go to Putin and say, well, look, we prefer you don't invade, so yes, we'll make sure, we'll give you that written guarantee that Ukraine will not be able to join NATO, or at least put it on the table for 5 years. That was never going to happen. Why do you think the Russians thought it would?
Well, I mean, because they were going to try it. I think they were going to try it, and it came close. and Putin actually expressed this on Monday in his talk to his National Security Council, when he said that in a conversation he had with Biden, Biden did offer the idea of a moratorium on NATO enlargement and not a guarantee in the future, you see, in the long term. And Putin's response to his counsel was, well, a moratorium would simply allow NATO to take more time to prepare the Ukrainians for NATO accession in the future. So then we still lose, we the Russians. But I believe that he was still, he offered it. I mean, he put it on the table. Whether it's a setup or not, I believe Lavrov, the foreign minister, was genuine when he was hoping that there would be an agreement of some sort on Ukrainian neutrality. It had to come actually fundamentally from the Ukrainians themselves, in which they essentially their answer would have been to sign the Minsk agreements or implement them. They had signed them in 2015. Implement them. If they implemented the Minsk agreements, that would have given de facto neutrality, and that would have satisfied Russian objectives. I believe they were genuinely hoping that would happen. They signed this in 2015. That was not a fake. They signed it expecting the Ukrainians to implement it. And when they failed to implement it after 7 years of discussion, the Russians became frustrated. And that's what happened.
I can't help but think about the press conference today and our government, Trudeau and Freeland, out and out calling Putin a liar, as they're talking about the sanctions. So let's talk about sanctions for a second here. Do sanctions mean anything to Putin? Will sanctions make any difference here?
They mean a great deal, and he has, I believe, in the Russian government, has spent a great deal of time anticipating this and doing making alternate arrangements, particularly vis-a-vis China. So China is a key fallback for the Russians in this. It's not exactly the same thing as the West, but it is a measure of a cushion for the Russians. The other parts of India hasn't come on yet, and that's something to follow up. But they are very worried about that, but they felt that they could, at least in the short term, for the purposes of this operation, meet that. They could absorb it in the short term at least, and then they're going to worry about the after effects in the longer term. So that's the risk calculus, I believe. So they're important. They've calculated them. They're not insignificant, but they're not a deterrent to the operation which is occurring, which we see. And he's not going to stop. Right.
That was my next question. There's really no impetus for him to stop at this point.
No, he's thrown the dice. The old he's crossed the Rubicon.
Yeah.
The die is cast, as they say. So now this mission will play itself out. You're not going to stop short.
Okay, I have one last thing to ask, and I don't know that there is an answer for this. I've heard speculation as well, and the question is simply, why now? One of the theories being that Putin decided to do this, to invade now, because he sees the West as being weak. We're in the middle of a pandemic. He notices the split in a country like the U.S., which is so divided politically. Why do you think, why now?
All those things are factors. So I guess what I would say to you is that this has been in play. The Ukraine situation has been in play since February 2015 with the signing of the Minsk Accords, which brought the cessation of the fighting. And that, since then, there have been 7 years of discussions to actually resolve this issue. And the Ukrainians, the Russians were not going to let Ukraine go to the West. And for 7 years, this has been a push-pull between Russia saying, come on, you got to come back here to us, and Ukrainians saying, no, we want to go west. So after 7 years of discussion going round in circles and various things, the Russians, I believe, they've reached their point of exhaustion on that in terms of their own calculus. And so the time was right for them for all the reasons you stated, and they felt that there was no reason to continue the negotiations. They felt they weren't going to get anywhere.
I will ask you one last question and then let you go. As I hear you describe the situation, you referred to the Minsk agreement as well. Are you, in your mind, laying some of the blame for this on Ukrainians themselves?
Well, it's not a question of blame. It's a question of policy options, and I'm making no moral judgments. The Ukrainians had an option to sign Minsk or implement Minsk and avoid a war. That is a policy option. You can say they had the right to refuse. Yes, they did. But in so doing, they also had the right to to put a situation in place where they would be at war with France. So this is a judgment that every country makes in its own right. Ukrainians made the decision in their own sovereign right, and now they have to deal with those consequences. They had the option to actually implement Minsk and avoid the war. They would have then been in a neutral position vis-a-vis Russia. That was a policy option. I will not pass judgment on what was right and what was wrong. That's for the Ukrainians to have made those decisions. They have to now live with the decisions they made.
Okay. Mr. RASIULIS, I thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. Hope we can count on you again at some point in the future.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, you may count on me if I can be of help.
Andrew RASIULIS, he's a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute.